The day begins before the sun, in the softest grey light of dawn. You are still beneath your thin quilt, feeling the slight chill in the air that seeps through the wooden walls. The tatami mat beneath you is firm, its woven surface cool to the touch. From somewhere in the darkness outside, the faint crow of a rooster threads through the quiet, not sharp, but muted, as if even the bird is reluctant to shatter the stillness. Your home is small, yet it holds the weight of many generations. The beams above your head are darkened by decades of smoke from the hearth. In the dimness, you can just make out the low shelves, where bowls and lacquered trays are neatly stacked. A faint scent of cedar wood mingles with the smoky aroma left from last night's fire. A smell that is part of the rhythm of every morning. You rise slowly, careful not to wake the children who are still curled under their quilts. Their breathing is soft, steady. Stepping lightly, you cross the narrow room. The floorboards groan faintly beneath your weight, but you know where to step to make the least sound. In the center of the main room sits the sunken hearth, its ashes gray and still. You crouch beside it and add a few thin sticks of kindling, blowing gently until the embers catch. The faint glow grows, and soon the gentle crackle of fire begins to fill the silence. Breakfast is prepared with few words. Rice from last season's harvest is warmed in a pot, and a small clay jar is opened to reveal pickled daikon. The vinegar scent rises briefly in the air. You portion out small bowls, the steam curling upward, carrying with it a promise of warmth against the morning cold. Outside, the first threads of light begin to slip through the shoji screens, painting pale patterns across the floor. When you eat, it is without hurry. Each bite of rice is plain but satisfying, its simplicity grounding you in the day ahead. Across from you, your spouse sips miso soup from a lacquered bowl, her gaze distant, already thinking of the tasks to come. The children stir and join you, rubbing sleep from their eyes, their hair tousled from the night. After the meal, you step outside, sliding the wooden door open. The air greets you, cool and damp, carrying the scent of earth and water. Before you lies the path to the fields, bordered by small, neatly kept gardens where a few early flowers nod gently in the breeze. The sound of water trickling from the irrigation channels is constant, a soft, living heartbeat that will guide your day. Along the path, neighbors are emerging from their homes, each carrying tools, hoes, baskets, bundles of seedlings. You exchange small nods of greeting, the kind that acknowledge shared labor without demanding conversation. There is a quiet camaraderie in these moments, an unspoken bond forged by the land itself. The sky above is a pale wash of color, shifting from gray to the faintest blue. In the east, the sun is still hidden, but the light grows steadily. Ahead, the rice paddies stretch out like a mosaic of mirrors, their surfaces rippling gently under the breath of the morning wind. The mud beneath the water is soft and cool, ready to receive the seedlings that will sustain the village for the year to come. You reach the edge of your plot and pause, letting the quiet settle into you. There is a long day ahead. Hours bent over the flooded earth, hours of patient repetition, but for now, you take in the scene. The air is damp against your skin. The calls of distant birds echo faintly from the hills. Somewhere, a dog barks once, then falls silent again. In the distance, beyond the fields, the forest rises in deep green folds. Its trees stand watch over the village, their leaves whispering softly in the breeze. You know that later in the season you will venture there to gather firewood, to collect herbs, to hunt for mushrooms after the rains. But today, your world is here, in the paddies, in the slow bending of your back toward the earth. You step into the water, feeling the mud squeeze gently around your toes. The chill seeps upward through your legs, but soon your body will grow accustomed to it. Around you, others are already at work, their silhouettes reflected in the water's surface. The sound of feet shifting in mud, of seedlings being placed into the earth, becomes the quiet rhythm of the morning. This is how every day begins, season after season. In the heart of the Edo period, far from the bustle of the cities, life here is marked not by clocks, but by the rising and setting of the sun, by the needs of the land, by the slow turning of the year. The path to the paddies is familiar, worn smooth by countless footsteps over the years. It winds between small vegetable gardens and narrow streams that glint in the morning light. The soft clatter of wooden gaiter sandals echoes gently against the earth, mixing with the murmur of flowing water. Somewhere ahead, a child's laughter rises briefly, then fades into the hushed chorus of the waking village. The sky now carries more color, the faint blush of the sun beginning to push above the eastern hills. A thin mist hangs low over the fields, curling around the edges of the paddies and blurring the line between land and water. It is cool still, but the promise of the day's warmth is already in the air. You pass a neighbor's home and see smoke rising from the chimney, the scent of burning pine drifting across the path. Further on, a group of elders sit together beneath a persimmon tree, their hands busy weaving straw into ropes. They nod in greeting, but do not pause in their work. Such moments are part of the rhythm here, brief connections woven into the larger fabric of the day. When you reach your field, you set down your bundle of seedlings. The plants are bright green, their roots damp from the stream where they were kept overnight. Kneeling at the water's edge, you roll up your trousers, letting the cool air brush your skin. The first step into the paddy sends a soft shiver up your legs. The water is cold, and the mud beneath yields slowly under your weight. You begin planting. Each seedling is pressed gently but firmly into the soft earth, spaced with care so that it may grow strong. The movement is repetitive, almost meditative. Your back bends, straightens, bends again. The sound of your hands parting the water joins the quiet chorus of the others working nearby. Occasionally, someone speaks, a few words about the weather, a reminder to keep watch for egrets that sometimes pull up the tender shoots. But for the most part, the work is silent. It is not the silence of solitude, but the comfortable quiet of shared labor, where conversation is unnecessary. The air warms slowly. Beads of moisture gather on your brow, and the brim of your straw hat grows heavy with dampness. Insects hover over the paddies, their wings catching the sunlight. A frog splashes nearby, disappearing into the green shade of the seedlings. Every so often you pause to straighten your back, letting your eyes wander over the scene. The fields stretch in every direction, broken only by narrow earthen ridges and the glint of water channels. Beyond them, the village is a scatter of wooden rooftops, and further still, the hills rise, holding the morning in their quiet embrace. A young boy wades through a neighboring field, carrying a small wooden bucket. His feet move with care, and the water ripples outward from each step. He is bringing lunch to his father, who straightens from his work to accept the bundle. There is a brief bow of thanks, and then the planting resumes. Time moves differently here. Hours pass without the need for markers. The position of the sun, the length of the shadows, the way the light shifts across the paddies. These are the clocks you have always known. The steady, unchanging rhythm is as much a part of you as the land itself. Around mid-morning, a soft breeze stirs the air, carrying with it the scent of wild flowers from the edges of the fields. The sound of wind in the grass blends with the steady splash of footsteps in the water. It is a simple music, a reminder that the land and the people are bound together in quiet harmony. As the sun climbs higher, you adjust the knot of your headscarf and continue. There is satisfaction in seeing the work progress, the bare, muddy paddy slowly transforming into neat, orderly rows of green. It is hard labor, but also a labor that shapes the heart of the village. Without these fields, there is no life here. In the distance, you see the figure of the village headman walking the ridges between the paddies. His steps are careful, his gaze scanning the work. He offers a few words to the farmers he passes, nodding in approval or pausing to listen to a concern. When he reaches you, he stops briefly to comment on the straightness of your rows, then continues on his way without hurry. By the time you pause to wipe your brow, the light has shifted again. The mist has lifted, leaving the sky a clear pale blue. The sun reflects off the water, sending small, shimmering patterns across your face and hands. The work continues, each plant set into the earth with the same steady care as the first. There is no rush to finish, for the day is long, and the work will always be here tomorrow. In this, there is a kind of peace. The certainty that life moves forward at its own pace, untouched by the haste of the outside world. By late morning, the sun sits higher in the sky, and the warmth begins to settle over the fields. The air is heavier now, carrying with it the mingled scents of wet earth, young rice plants, and the faint tang of distant cooking fires from the village. Your back aches slightly from hours of bending, and your palms are lined with fine traces of mud, soft but persistent. The work continues in the same slow rhythm. Step forward, bend, press the seedling into the earth, straighten, step again. Each action blends into the next until time feels less like a line and more like a quiet circle. Around you, the water in the paddies reflects the deepening blue of the sky, broken only by the ripple of your movements. A pair of white egrets drifts lazily overhead, their wings catching the sunlight before they settle near the far end of the field. They move with elegant precision, lifting one slender leg at a time, eyes sharp for any small fish or insects disturbed by the work. Occasionally, one gives a soft, short call, not loud, but enough to echo faintly across the open space. By midday, the fields are dotted with figures, men, women, and older children, all working in quiet cooperation. Some stand for a moment to stretch their backs, wiping the sweat from their brows with the edges of their sleeves. Others pause at the water channels to refill their gourds, taking slow, measured sips before returning to the steady labor. The sun is warm on your shoulders now. You adjust the brim of your straw hat, feeling the rough texture of its fibers between your fingers. Beneath your feet, the mud has warmed slightly, but still holds the coolness of the water above it. You notice how your toes grip the earth without thought, keeping your balance as you work along the narrow ridges. Not far away, a mother works alongside her daughter, the girl barely in her teens. The mother's hands move quickly, practiced in the task, while the daughter follows more slowly, imitating each motion. Every so often, the mother offers a soft word of guidance, and the girl nods silently, her concentration fixed on the plants in her hands. When the sun is nearly overhead, the headman's voice calls out gently, signaling the midday rest. One by one, the farmers straighten, stretch, and make their way toward the shade at the edge of the fields. You follow, climbing out of the paddy and feeling the mud loosen from your legs as you step onto the grass. Beneath a stand of young willows, people gather in small groups, opening bundles wrapped in cloth. Inside are simple meals, bowls of rice sprinkled with sesame seeds, small strips of pickled vegetables, perhaps a piece of salted fish if the family had some to spare. You unwrap your own portion, the familiar scent of warm rice and vinegar bringing comfort. The air here is cooler in the shade, the sound of the leaves overhead blending with the distant murmur of the irrigation channels. Conversations are soft and unhurried. A few words about the state of the seedlings, the weather forecast from the oldest farmer, who swears he can read the wind like a scroll. Someone mentions the coming village festival, a time when the work will briefly give way to music, lanterns, and offerings at the shrine. As you eat, you watch the shimmering heat rise from the fields. The egrets have moved on, replaced by smaller birds that dart low over the water. A dragonfly hovers close, its wings catching the light before it darts away again. There is no rush to return to work just yet. The break is part of the day's rhythm, as necessary as the planting itself. After the meal, some farmers close their eyes for a brief rest, leaning back against the trunks of the willows. The sound of their breathing mingles with the hum of insects, creating a quiet that feels almost like a shared dream. You, too, let your gaze soften, following the gentle sway of the branches above. But soon, the headman rises, and the others follow. The break is over, and the work calls again. You return to the edge of your plot, stepping once more into the cool water. The first touch of mud against your skin is refreshing after the warmth of the grass, and you feel a renewed steadiness in your movements. The afternoon light has a different quality, brighter, sharper, yet it carries the same calm as the morning. The pattern resumes. Bend, plant, straighten, step. Around you, the quiet chorus of splashing feet and rustling leaves begins again, as constant and unchanging as the flow of the channels. By the time the sun begins its slow descent, you have planted row upon row, each one a promise of the harvest to come. The sight of the young green shoots standing in neat lines fills you with a quiet satisfaction. The day is far from over, but the work has already left its mark. In the ache of your muscles, the damp weight of your clothing, and the steady rhythm of your breath. The residence of Lord Haru stands at the quiet edge of the village, where the last gardens give way to bamboo and the earth begins to rise toward forested hills. From outside, the compound appears modest, white plaster and dark wooden beams, a tiled roof softened by a thin film of moss, a gate that slides open with a muted scrape. The hour is very early. Light has not yet declared the day. It lingers instead in a silver-gray hesitation along the horizon. In this pause, even the crows are reluctant to speak. Inside, the corridors are cool. Tatami mats hold the night's faint chill, and the shoji screens are pale with the first suggestion of dawn. A single lamp burns low in a ceramic holder, its flame a steady, gentle point in the stillness. Lord Haru wakes without a start. He simply opens his eyes as though rising from a shallow pool. For a moment he listens, to the distant drip of water from the bamboo spout in the garden, to the almost inaudible breath of a servant in the passage, to the soft tick of settling timbers. These are the familiar sounds that mark the beginning of every day. He sits up and folds his bedding with careful hands, smoothing the quilts the way his father taught him. The room holds very little. A chest of drawers, a low stand with writing tools arranged in quiet order, a single scroll in the alcove bearing the characters for patience and clarity. The brushwork is firm, the ink a deep, settled black. He bows his head toward the scroll, not as ritual so much as habit, then turns to dress. His underclothes are of plain cotton, clean and cool against the skin. Over them he places a sober kimono, then the pleated hakama that sits neatly at his waist. The cords are tightened without fuss. He threads them as he always has, his motions calm and unhurried, as though the day will offer all the time he needs. Near the wall, his sword rests in its lacquered scabbard. He lifts it and lays it beside him with a kind of quiet courtesy, acknowledging both the object and the role it signifies. The blade has not been drawn in years, and yet it is maintained with the same steady attention he gives to ledgers, roads, and irrigation gates. Peace, he knows, is a discipline. A servant appears at the threshold, kneeling to bow before announcing the bath. Haru answers with a small nod. In the washroom, the water is warm and faintly fragrant. He pours it slowly over his shoulders from a wooden ladle, watching it thin into rivulets that vanish into the floor. The heat wakes the skin gradually. The breath deepens. The mind steadies. When he is done, he dries his hands on a folded cloth and returns to the main room. Another servant has placed a tray near the veranda, miso soup in a lacquered bowl, a small dish of pickled plum, rice with a sprinkle of sesame, a slice of grilled river fish whose aroma is delicate and clean. Nothing is extravagant. Everything is enough. He eats in silence, but the silence is not empty. Through the partially open shoji, he can see the first birds step onto the garden stones, Sparrows, quick and small, testing the quiet before flight. The bamboo spout fills and tips. The water falls into the stone basin with a hollow note that seems to measure the seconds. Somewhere beyond the outer wall, a farmer's footfall passes on the road. A soft thud-thud, softened by dust. Haru lifts the bowl, meets the warmth of the soup, and sets it down again with care. Each gesture is an island of attention. When he finishes, he rinses his mouth with cool water and folds the cloth napkin into a neat square. He writes a brief line on a wooden tablet to remind himself, inspection of the Eastern Channel after sunrise, review storehouse figures with the master. Note damages from last week's rain on the North Road. He does not hurry the writing, though the characters are few. He believes that the line made on paper imparts a line to the day itself, a guide that calms both the mind and the path underfoot. Before stepping out, Haru visits the inner garden. It is small and precise, raked gravel in soft arcs, 3 low stones like dark islands, a pine trained over many seasons into a patient curve, moss that keeps the memory of recent rain. He kneels near the basin and dips a ladle, pouring water over his hands. The chill surprises him, as it does every morning, though he expects it. He breathes once, twice, and then sets the ladle back on the bamboo rest. Near the pond, the koi drift with the least possible motion, as if they were thoughts not yet formed into words. He returns to the corridor and finds his sandals waiting, their straps supple from careful use. A servant helps him into a light haori coat. Another brings the short list of messages received during the night. An inquiry from a merchant about passage through the domain, a note from a neighboring headman regarding a missing boundary marker, a courier's promise of arrival by tomorrow with letters from Edo. Haru acknowledges each with a brief thanks. None require immediate reply. He will tend to them after the morning rounds. At the threshold, he pauses. The sky is no longer grey, but a pale wash that suggests blue. The air carries a very fine mist, too light to be called rain, which settles on the sleeves of his coat and beads along the black edge of the roof tiles. From the village comes the wood-on-wood clack of pestles, the first measured beats of daily labor. He knows these sounds intimately. They have the same temperate quality as the domain itself, steady and even, seldom rushing, seldom standing still. He steps onto the veranda. The boards hold a memory of night cool, which lifts as his weight warms them. For a moment he simply stands, looking outward. The road beyond the outer gate lies quiet, a pale ribbon that threads toward fields he will soon walk. He can picture them without strain. The water smooth as glass before the first foot enters, the neat lines where seedlings have already taken root, the earthen ridges that keep the channels in order like low, thoughtful sentences guiding a page. One of the older retainers arrives at a careful pace and kneels to speak. His voice is low. There was a small slide on the north slope, he says. No injuries, a little stone on the path. The men have already begun to clear it. Haru listens with his full attention, then asks 2 questions, the kind that settle matters without perturbing them. Are the drainage ditches above that path clear? Has the shrine keeper nearby received extra lantern oil for the fog that lingers in that hollow? The retainer smiles faintly, as if relieved by the thoroughness of these small concerns, and assures him both are in hand. They exchange bows that are shallow but sincere. Haru moves along the gallery to the storehouse porch, where a low table holds maps and a brush wrapped in cloth. He studies the rice ledgers from the past 3 seasons, not to catch anyone in error, but to remind himself of the village's breath. Lean years and better, storms that bent the harvest, winters that asked more than they gave. He traces one figure with his finger and pauses. The sum is as expected. Yet he considers the late frost of early spring and makes a mental note to ask after the eastern plots, which lie closer to the river's colder air. Consideration is not a grand virtue, he thinks. It is merely the practice of being willing to look twice. A breeze passes through the garden and lifts the edge of his sleeve. With it comes a scent he likes and scarcely names: wet stone, pine, and the faintest thread of smoke from a distant hearth. The lamp in his room is now out. The day has assumed its own light. He turns toward the gate, and a young servant hurries up with the umbrella box, though it will not be needed, and with Haru's small ledger wrapped in cloth. The boy waits for praise but receives only an appreciative nod. Words are not wasted here, and yet they are not absent. They arrive exactly when required, and then they rest. Before leaving the compound, Haru pauses at the household shrine, a narrow corner alcove with a wooden tablet and a dish of salt. He bows, places 3 grains upon the dish, and whispers a short line that has always felt more like breath than speech. The gesture is not about favor, it is about alignment. He would like his steps to fall in the right places today, and for the people under his care to find their work proportional and sufficient. When he at last slides the gate and steps into the road, the village is beginning to color itself with motion. A woman carries a bucket with a willow switch laid across its mouth to quiet the water. A child runs and then remembers to walk. A dog decides the morning is worth acknowledging with one echoing bark. Haru sets off at a measured pace toward the eastern channel, his sandals whispering on the dust. The sword at his side rests easily, and the day opens before him without hurry, as if the path had been waiting all along to be walked this way, attentively, steadily, with a mind that chooses to go no faster than the land itself will allow. The morning has fully arrived by the time Lord Haru steps beyond the gate of his residence. The pale light of dawn has matured into the softer gold of early sun, bathing the village in a hue that deepens the browns of the wooden houses and sets the straw rooftops aglow. The air carries the faint scent of damp soil, warmed now by the sun's first touch, mingled with the sharper aroma of fresh-cut grass from the paths that border the fields. The road ahead is narrow, bordered by low stone walls and small ditches that carry water from the higher slopes. Haru's sandals make a faint crunch against the gravel as he walks, each step measured and deliberate. The sword at his side hangs easily, its lacquered scabbard gleaming faintly when it catches the light. His presence does not demand attention, but it gathers it all the same. Villagers glance up from their work to bow slightly as he passes, the gesture one of habit and respect. He begins his rounds at the eastern edge of the village, where the irrigation channels fork and run in long, shallow veins through the paddies. These channels are the lifeblood of the harvest. Their upkeep cannot be left to chance. Haru stops at the first junction, crouching down so his eyes are level with the flowing water. The surface catches the sunlight in a gentle shimmer, the movement slow but constant. He dips a hand into the channel, feeling the coolness, and studies the bank for any sign of erosion. A retainer follows at a respectful distance, carrying a small wooden board and brush to record his observations. At Haru's quiet instruction, the man notes a small patch where the bank should be reinforced before the next heavy rain. The work is not urgent, but leaving it too long would invite trouble. Haru's voice is calm, the words chosen with precision. Further along the path, an older farmer approaches, bowing deeply before speaking. His face is tanned and lined from years in the sun, and his voice carries the weight of a lifetime spent on this land. He explains that a section of the channel near his fields has been slowing, the flow weakened by silt. Haru listens without interrupting, his gaze steady but warm. When the man finishes, Haru asks several questions. When the slowdown was first noticed, whether other farmers in the area had observed the same. His tone is even, without reproach. He promises to walk there himself before the day is out, and the farmer bows again, reassured. At the far end of the fields, the road curves past a cluster of small houses. Here, children are playing, their bare feet slapping softly against the packed earth. When they see Haru, they stop and bow instinctively, their eyes following him with a mixture of curiosity and awe. He returns their bows with the faintest incline of his head before continuing on, the sound of their giggles resuming behind him once he has passed. By mid-morning, he reaches the village storehouse. The building is sturdy, its thick wooden walls built to withstand both summer heat and winter storms. A faint scent of rice and dried straw greets him as he steps inside. The storehouse master, a man with sharp eyes and a careful manner, meets him at the door and bows deeply. Together they walk between the neat stacks of rice sacks, each marked in black ink with the family that contributed it. The air is cool here, preserved by the building's careful design. The master opens a ledger and lays it on a low table. The ink marks are crisp, the columns orderly. Haru runs his finger lightly down the rows, noting the quantities stored, the portions already distributed, and the reserves kept aside for emergencies. They speak quietly about the storehouse's condition, about repairs that might be needed before the autumn rains. Every detail is weighed, for Haru knows that the stability of the village rests, in part, within these walls. Once the review is finished, Haru steps outside again, blinking as the bright sunlight meets his eyes. From here, his path leads toward the small shrine on the hill just beyond the last houses. The climb is gentle, the steps worn smooth from years of use. Along the way, he passes a row of persimmon trees, their leaves stirring in the breeze. A few fruits, still small and green, hang among the branches, quiet promises of autumn. At the shrine, he pauses at the stone basin to wash his hands, the water cool and clear. He approaches the offering hall and bows deeply, placing a pinch of salt and a small cup of sake on the wooden tray before the altar. The air here is shaded and still, carrying the faint scent of incense from a morning ceremony. His prayer is silent, but his thoughts are clear. For the land to remain steady, for the people to remain well, for the day to pass without disruption. From the hilltop, the view of the village is complete. The rooftops are scattered among the green fields, the irrigation channels glinting like threads of silver. Beyond them, the forest rises, dark and steady. Haru lingers here for a few breaths, letting the scene settle in his mind before turning to make his way down. On his return, he stops briefly to speak with a pair of craftsmen repairing the wheel of an ox cart. They bow from where they work, their hands dusty with wood shavings. Haru examines their progress, asking if they have enough timber to finish the repair before the next market day. They nod, explaining that the wood was cut in the nearby hills and seasoned over winter, chosen for its strength. He nods in approval, offering a few quiet words of encouragement before continuing on. By the time Haru nears his residence again, the sun is high enough to warm the stones along the path. The village is in full motion now. The blacksmith's hammer rings faintly from the far end. A merchant's voice calls out his goods, and the low murmur of farmers in the fields blends into the background. These sounds are the pulse of the place, steady and reassuring. Haru walks among them not as a distant figure, but as one who carries both authority and the quiet responsibility to keep the rhythm unbroken. By the time Lord Haru returns to his residence, the light has shifted into the softer, more measured tones of early afternoon. The village hum continues beyond the walls, but here, inside the compound, the air feels still and cool. The garden at the center of the residence breathes gently. A breeze passes through the pine branches, carrying with it the faint scent of resin and the dryness of sun-warmed stone. In the pond, a single koi stirs the water lazily, its golden scales catching the muted light. Haru removes his sandals at the veranda and steps onto the tatami with quiet precision. His study is a narrow room at the eastern side of the house, chosen so that the best light falls through the shoji in the earlier hours of the day. Now, the sunlight is diffuse, bright enough to work by but softened by the paper screens. On the low writing desk, his inkstone, brush, and a stack of ledgers are already laid out, arranged neatly by a servant who knows his habits. He kneels before the desk, straightening his back as he settles in. The ink is ground fresh. The soft scrape of the ink stick against the stone is rhythmic, meditative. The scent is faintly mineral, mixing with the aroma of cedar from the desk itself. Outside, the cicadas have begun their afternoon drone, a low hum that folds into the background. When the ink has reached the right depth of black, he begins to write, his brush moving slowly over the paper. Each character is formed with deliberate care, as much for the discipline it reflects as for the meaning it conveys. The reports he works on this afternoon cover a range of matters: the yield from the southern fields, the repairs to the main bridge, the quantity of rice distributed to the temple for their spring festival. Haru's mind moves steadily from one to the next, never rushing, never allowing a careless stroke. His retainer sits nearby, ready to answer questions or retrieve additional records when needed. Occasionally, Haru pauses to look over the documents from previous years, comparing figures, noting the subtle variations from season to season. From the veranda comes the sound of a servant walking past, their footsteps muted on the wooden boards. Somewhere in the distance, a bamboo water spout tips into its basin with a hollow knock, then fills again. These sounds blend into the stillness, markers of time without urgency. In the mid-afternoon, Haru sets his brush aside and stands, stretching slowly before crossing into the courtyard for his daily sword practice. The courtyard is small, bordered by a low wall and the shade of a camellia tree. Here, he draws his blade, the steel glinting briefly in the filtered light. His practice is not hurried or fierce. Instead, each cut and turn is measured, flowing into the next like the phrases of a quiet poem. The swish of the blade through the air is almost soundless, a private dialogue between warrior and steel. He pauses at intervals, adjusting his stance, breathing in and out with steady rhythm. In these moments, there is no thought of defense or attack, only the refinement of movement, the pursuit of balance. This practice, repeated every day without fail, anchors him as firmly as his duties. After several sequences, he sheathes the sword with the same care he began with and returns it to its stand inside. A servant brings a small tray with tea, green and faintly grassy, poured into a shallow ceramic cup. Haru drinks it slowly, watching the steam curl upward before it vanishes. The warmth in his hands and the faint bitterness on his tongue mark a pause in the day's work. Returning to the study, he turns his attention to correspondence. Letters from neighboring domains are unrolled and read, their contents varied. A request to borrow laborers for a bridge project, a report of a merchant caravan delayed by heavy rain, a polite inquiry from a nearby temple about additional rice for their charitable kitchen. Haru considers each carefully, drafting responses with the same steady hand he uses for his reports. Among the letters is one from Edo, written in a hand he knows well, his younger brother's. The letter speaks of the capital's busy markets, of scholars debating under the cherry blossoms, of the restless energy that seems always to hum through the city. Haru reads it twice, a faint smile at the corners of his mouth, then sets it aside to answer later. For a moment, his gaze drifts to the garden beyond the shoji, and he imagines the bustle of Edo in contrast to the stillness here. He feels no envy, only an awareness that both worlds serve their purpose. As the sun lowers, the light in the study changes again, growing warmer, softer. The patterns of the shoji screen stretch longer across the tatami. Haru reviews the last of the ledgers, making a few final notations before closing them. The brushes are rinsed, the inkstone cleaned and dried, and each tool returned to its place. The order of the desk is not merely preference. It is a reflection of the order he expects in the domain. Before leaving the room, Haru steps to the shoji and slides it open, looking out onto the garden. The shadows of the pine branches stretch long over the gravel, and the koi in the pond move lazily beneath the surface. Somewhere near the wall, a bird dips to drink from the water's edge, the ripples spreading outward until they fade into stillness again. For a moment, he lingers there, breathing in the cool air. The afternoon has been as it should be, measured, productive, free of unrest. He closes the shoji gently and steps into the corridor, the sound of his footfalls mingling with the distant ring of the evening bell from the temple beyond the village. It is nearly time for the evening meal, but there is no rush. In this place, the day moves with its own quiet rhythm, one that has not changed in years. As the final tasks of the day conclude, Lord Haru steps out from his study and makes his way toward the main hall where the evening meal awaits. The corridor is lit now by lanterns placed at regular intervals, their glow soft and golden against the polished wood. The scent of warm rice and simmered vegetables drifts from the kitchen, a reminder of the constancy that anchors each day. The evening meal is served with quiet ceremony. Haru sits at the low table, his back straight, his movements deliberate. The dishes are modest, yet carefully prepared. A bowl of rice steamed to gentle fluff, miso soup with slices of daikon, a plate of simmered greens, and a small piece of grilled river fish whose skin glistens in the lamplight. Beside him, his retainers provide reports on the day's events. Their voices are steady, each speaking in turn. The subjects are familiar. Repairs to a bridge after heavy rain, the progress of planting in the eastern paddies, the movement of traveling merchants. Haru listens, offering a brief comment here and there, his tone measured and calm. He asks for a note to be sent to the carpenter overseeing the bridge repairs, ensuring he has the timber he needs. He directs that the merchants be given safe passage, but reminded to observe the domain's rules. There is no rush, no sense of urgency, only the steady rhythm of governance, like the slow turning of a wheel. When the meal is finished, the trays are cleared with silent efficiency. Haru rises and walks toward the garden path, his sandals whispering against the veranda boards. Outside, the air has cooled noticeably. A faint breeze moves through the pine trees, carrying the scent of night-blooming flowers from somewhere beyond the wall. Lanterns have been lit along the garden's winding paths, their light reflected in the pond, where koi drift like pieces of gold in the water. He pauses by the bamboo water spout, watching as it fills and tips with its familiar hollow knock before resetting. The sound has marked the passing of hours in this place for as long as he can remember. Beyond the wall, the murmur of the village reaches him, the low voices of neighbors speaking before bed, the distant creak of a cart returning late, the laughter of children fading into the night. Haru walks slowly around the pond, his gaze shifting between the water, the lantern light, and the dark outline of the trees beyond. His mind is quiet but attentive, considering the small matters that will require his hand tomorrow. There is comfort in the predictability of these thoughts, in the knowledge that each day arrives bearing its own familiar work. At the far end of the garden, he stops beneath a maple tree whose leaves stir softly in the wind. From here, he can see the faint glow of the village lanterns scattered across the dark plain. They look like small constellations, mirroring the stars that have begun to appear in the sky above. The moon is a pale, incomplete circle tonight, its light diffused by a thin veil of clouds. Haru stands there for some time, his hands resting lightly at his sides, breathing in the night air. Moments like this remind him why his role matters, not in grand gestures or dramatic displays, but in the steady care that keeps life moving without disturbance. The people sleep more easily when they know their land is tended, their disputes heard, their work respected. Returning to the main hall, Haru stops briefly at the household shrine. The small alcove holds a wooden tablet and a dish of salt lit by a single candle. He bows his head and offers a short prayer, not for himself but for the health of the domain and the peace of those who live within its borders. The candle flame flickers as he straightens, casting shifting shadows along the wall. In his private chamber, the bedding has been laid out on the tatami. A lamp glows softly in the corner, its light diffused by a paper shade. The room is uncluttered. A chest for his clothes, a small table for his writing tools, and the alcove with its seasonal scroll, a brush painting of plum blossoms in early bloom. Haru kneels beside the table and takes up his brush one last time today. On a single sheet, he writes a few lines to his younger brother in Edo, a note about the recent harvest, a mention of the letter he received earlier, a wish that they might see each other before the year's end. The letter is folded neatly, the seal pressed with his family crest. It will be sent with the courier in the morning. Setting the brush aside, he extinguishes the lamp on the table, leaving only the light of the corner lamp to soften the room. Before lying down, Haru slides the shoji open to let the cool night air drift in. The garden beyond is quiet now, the pond still, the lanterns extinguished one by one. Only the moon remains to light the stones and the low wall. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls once, then again, its voice carrying over the rooftops. Haru lies down on the bedding, pulling the quilt over himself. The tatami beneath is firm and familiar, grounding him in the moment. His eyes close easily, his breathing deep and even. Outside, the bamboo spout tips once more, the hollow knock sounding in the dark, and the water flows again into the basin. It is the sound that will accompany his sleep, the quiet heartbeat of a domain at rest. In this way, the day ends as it should, without haste, without disruption, bound by the steady cycle that has shaped the life of the village and its lord for generations. The afternoon light has softened, and the village sounds retreat to a comfortable distance, low, continuous, like a river beneath stones. You follow a narrow garden path toward the tea room, moving with the unhurried steps that the space itself seems to request. The path is laid with stepping stones, their surfaces smoothed by years of footfalls. Moss grows thick between them, a muted green that holds the day's coolness. Each step asks you to look down, to place your foot deliberately, and in this way the garden draws your attention inward before you even reach the door. The tea house is small, set slightly apart from the main dwelling. It stands in deliberate modesty, stucco walls the color of weathered rice straw, timber darkened by time, a low roof that gathers the afternoon light without gleam. At one corner, a bamboo gutter trickles into a stone basin. The sound is slow and hollow, a measured note that repeats just often enough to mark time without dividing it. A plum tree leans over the roofline, its new leaves delicate as the wing of a moth. In late spring, a handful of blossoms might still hold on, pale and near translucent, their scent almost imagined rather than perceived. Before the entrance there is a sukubai, the kneeling basin, of rough-hewn stone. The water within is clear and cool, fed by a concealed pipe that keeps the surface from ever becoming entirely still. A bamboo dipper rests on two slats, quiet as a sleeping thing. You kneel here and rinse your hands, first the left, then the right, then raise a small portion of water to your lips without drinking. The gesture makes no claim to purification in the grand sense. It simply draws a line between the world outside and the one you are about to enter. The nijiriguchi, the small crawl-through door, remains closed for the moment. Its size is not a trick, but a reminder. All who enter must bow, all must become small for this brief time. To one side, a plain wooden shelf holds geta sandals that look nearly identical, pairs of quiet footprints waiting to be resumed. The air holds the faintest scent of cedar and the more elusive odor of clean tatami, a sweetness so pale you almost notice it only after it is gone. The tea master waits just within, her silhouette softened by the paper of the shoji. Her kimono is of plant-dyed cloth, mud-washed brown with a thread of gray-blue at the hem. There is nothing to draw the eye, which is just as she intends. Her hands are still for now, open and at rest in her lap. When she inclines her head, you return the bow, and with that small exchange the space becomes yours as much as it is hers. Shoes removed, you step onto the wooden threshold. The grain of the wood is smooth under your soles, holding the afternoon's stored warmth. Inside, the light is careful. It falls across the room in broad, pale rectangles, softened by the lattice of the shoji. Dust does not dance here. The air is too composed for that. You cross to your place with as little sound as possible and kneel upon the tatami. The mat is firm, its woven surface offering a fine resistance to the skin. The sensation is slightly cool, like river sand shadowed by a stone. The room is spare in a way that gives back more than it takes. In the tokonoma, the alcove, hangs a single scroll. Its calligraphy is not oversized, not dramatic. The characters are shaped without haste, their strokes retaining the breath of the person who made them. One time, one meeting. Beside the scroll, in a bamboo vase, a spray of wild grasses leans lightly to one side. Their green is not the ornamental green of gardens, but the color of a hillside after a small rain. The vase itself is not perfectly round. It remembers the node from which it was cut. You become aware of how the room guides attention. The ceiling is low, the windows small, the walls the color of dry wheat. Everything suggests edges without insisting on them. There is no polished silence here, rather a soft, living quiet in which small sounds arrive fully and then depart. The click of bamboo on stone outside. The minimal creak of a floor beam as someone shifts their weight. The breath before a movement begins. The tea master's hands come to life without calling attention to themselves. She sets a kettle upon the recessed hearth. The iron is dark and modest, its lid sitting like a calm thought. The first whisper of heat releases a timbre of sound. Too low to be a hiss, more akin to a sigh held just behind the throat. It will grow slowly, becoming one of the voices in the room, but not yet. For now, there is only potential warmth, the future of steam. You notice the threshold again, and with it, the sense of leaving and arriving. Beyond the shoji lies the ordinary day, fields, tools, errands, meals. In here is a refinement of those things, not a rejection. Water is still water. Fire is still fire. Attention is attention. The ceremony does not pretend to erase the labor of the morning or the duties of the evening. It offers a space in which to feel their shape without their weight. A tray appears, set down with a grace that keeps the wood from speaking. On it rests a shawan, the tea bowl, chosen for the season. Its glaze is a quiet white with a faint shadow of ash, where the kiln taught heat to change clay. The bowl's lip is slightly uneven. When you run a finger along it, the imperfection feels like the shallow groove left by a stream in dry weather. Beside the bowl is the shashaku, the tea scoop, carved of bamboo to a slender curve, its surface polished by many hands. And there is the chasen, the whisk, fine-tined and pale, waiting with a patience that belongs to plants more than to tools. Before anything more, there is a pause. It is long enough to allow your breath to settle and short enough that you do not count it as time. In that pause, the room completes its gathering. The kettle deepens its low voice. The light shifts as a cloud passes. Somewhere outside, a single bird offers a phrase and then declines to repeat it. When the tea master moves again, it is with a pace that feels related to the pulse. She cleans the utensils in your full view, not because they are dirty, but because this is the act that invites them into use. A silk cloth passes over the rim of the bowl. The shashaku is wiped and laid down in a precise orientation. The whisk is rinsed in clear water and then set to rest on a folded paper. These gestures seem to polish something you cannot name. Perhaps they polish the idea of attention itself. Steam begins to rise at last from the kettle in a thin, steady thread. The sound has ripened into something like wind across dry grass. The tea master dips the ladle, lifting water that trembles in the bowl of bamboo before settling into calm. She pours a small measure into the empty shawan and swirls it, warming the clay. She empties it again, and a fragrance rises, not of tea yet, but of wet earth and something faintly sweet, the first breath of rain on a dry courtyard. Matcha appears from a small caddy, bright as moss in deep shade. She measures it with the shashaku. 1, 2, a third half scoop that seems to belong more to grace than to quantity. The powder rests in the bowl like a held note. Water follows, not much, and the whisk meets them both. The motion is not hurried, it is consistent. The whisk lifts and lowers, drawing tiny vortices that fold the powder into the water until the surface is a pale green with a shade of foam that remembers breath. You watch the tea master's wrists. The movement is a study in sufficiency. No excess, no stinted effort, only what the gesture demands. The world beyond the shoji narrows to the width of that motion. When she stops, the tea stills as though it has decided to be ready rather than been told to be. A bow offers the bowl to you. Its warmth arrives through your palms. A calm heat that invites rather than insists. You turn the bowl slightly, once, twice, so the front faces away, the courtesy that makes of sipping a shared act instead of a private one. But the first sip belongs to the next subpart. For now, the room holds the moment before taste, the invitation of color, the drift of steam, the feeling that time has bent to accommodate a small, complete thing. You sit there, aware of your own breath, the woven give of the tatami beneath your knees, the quiet life of the garden through the paper wall. The tea room has no locks. It relies on attention to keep it whole. And as the light thins a little further, you find that the world has already slowed to meet it. The bowl rests in your hands for a moment, then returns to the tatami before you, as if both of you needed to understand its weight. The tea master does not hurry you along the path. She waits until your breath has settled again, and then, with deliberate calm, she gathers the elements of the ceremony nearer, each tool with its own quiet place and reason. First, the chawan, the tea bowl, chosen for the season. In cooler months, the bowl is thick and deep, the clay holding heat the way a hand holds a memory. In warmer months, the bowl is lighter, its body slightly wider so that steam rises more quickly and does not linger like a veil. Today's bowl is somewhere between those moods. Its glaze is a soft, milky white, yet along the foot there is a blush of ash, the subtle print of the kiln's breath. When the tea master turns it in her hand, the glaze catches a shy glint. Beside it lies the chashaku, the bamboo scoop. Carved from a single culm of bamboo, it has been cured and shaped to a slender curve, the tip thinned to lift powder without compressing it. If you look closely, you can see faint growth rings along its surface, the marks of time held in the plant's body. The tea master's fingers know this arc. She aligns it on the tatami with the handle precisely parallel to the bowl's lip. The orientation is not decoration. It is the grammar of the room. The chasen, the whisk, rests on a folded square of paper, its tines pale and fine. It began as a tube of bamboo, split delicately into dozens of slender fibers, then coaxed outward to form a crown of bristles. No two chasen are exactly the same, just as no two hands move exactly the same way. This one carries the faint, honeyed scent that bamboo keeps even after years. A reminder that the tool was once a living thing reaching for light. A small caddy, natsume, holds the matcha. Its lacquered surface reflects nothing sharply. It seems to keep light rather than bounce it back. The lid lifts with the softest sigh. Inside, the powdered tea is a quiet green, deeper than leaf, brighter than moss. It is the color of a shade you might find only at the bottom of a well or under a stone in the river where light arrives as a rumor. The tea master tilts the caddy just enough for you to see, then replaces the lid as if returning something to rest. Closer to the hearth sits the kama, the iron kettle, set upon sunken coals within the row. Its form is plain, the iron textured like a winter cloud. When the lid trembles, it is not agitation but agreement. The water is ready to speak. A ladle, the hishaku, leans against a wooden rest. Its bowl is shallow, its handle long, made of the same plant that gives the room its screens and the scoop its curve. The ladle's length allows water to be lifted without leaning too close to the heat. The gesture remains comfort. Now the movements begin to gather. The tea master takes the fukusa, a square of silk dyed in a subdued color, and folds it with exactness, its edges meeting with a dignity that has nothing to do with show. She wipes the shashaku with this cloth, not to cleanse it from dirt, but to align it with use, to bring it from the world of waiting into the world of work. The cloth's whisper along the bamboo is brief and dry like a page turning. She lifts the chakin, the small linen cloth, damp but not dripping, and wipes the shawan within. This is a cleansing of touch, a preparation rather than a remedy. When she returns the chakin to its place, the bowl sits in front of you, open, as if listening. The tea scoop lies to its right, the whisk just beyond, waiting. Steam rises now in fine threads from the kettle. The room's soundscape narrows, a quiet pulse of heat, the weightless hiss of the water, the soft settling of the house around you. The tea master takes up the ladle and dips it into the kettle. The water beads along the rim and trembles, then steadies. She pours a measured portion into the empty bowl. The sound is silken, almost without splash. After a moment, she tilts the bowl so the hot water warms every interior surface, then returns it to the hearth. The tea appears with the lifting of the natsume's lid. The shashaku enters like a brush taking up ink. One gentle scoop, then another. A half scoop to follow, an amount that is not a strict sum so much as an accord struck between tea, bowler, and guest. The powder settles into the warmed chawan like a calm cloud that has chosen a valley. It holds its shape, impossible and light. Water follows. Not much, just enough to meet the powder and ask it to speak. The whisk takes its place, and with it the character of motion shifts. The tea master's hands do not hurry. They move at the speed of attention. The whisk dips and lifts, drawing breath into liquid, changing color into texture. A pale froth begins to bloom across the surface, not a cap of bubbles, but a fine, even haze. The sound is like a distant downpour heard through leaves. Gentle, steady, more felt than heard. As the wrist turns, the lines of the whisk become a blur that holds its own intention. You notice how the bowl's depth and curvature shape the movement, how the whisk finds the center and resides there, how it edges outward and returns, how a slight adjustment of angle creates a quieter sound. These are not tricks. They are courtesies to the tea and to the hands that will receive it. All the while, the room remains untroubled. The calligraphy in the alcove watches over the moments without comment. The grasses in the bamboo vase participate by leaning almost imperceptibly as air moves. Outside, the bamboo spout tips into the stone basin again, the hollow knock gathering the minutes into a rhythm you do not need to measure. You could stay in this step longer, and nothing would be lost. When the whisk lifts at last, it leaves a final pattern on the surface, something like wind pressed into water. The tea master taps the whisk lightly on the bowl's rim to free the last drops. She sets it down in its original place, the handle aligned with the scoop as before. The shashaku is lifted once more to neaten the rim of the powder left in the caddy. The lid turns, settles, and becomes quiet. Now the bowl has become more than clay. It is warmth and scent and a kind of light. The tea master turns it in her hands so that the most beautiful face is not presented to herself but to you. She bows, a measured lowering that says nothing and conveys everything. The bowl leaves her hands and approaches your own as if crossing a small bridge between solitude and company. Before taking it, you bow in return. The exchange is a form of speech for which the room has been preparing you since you washed your hands at the basin. You accept the bowl, and the heat is pleasant against your palms, neither timid nor insistent. You turn it in two small motions so that the front faces away. The lip meets your mouth softly, an introduction rather than a claim. But the sip itself belongs to the next part, for now the bowl rests again, a small world within the larger one, waiting with you. In this pause, the tools breathe the quiet they were made for. The scoop glows with the faintest luster. The whisk retains a fragrance of steam and tea. The kettle hums like a patient thought. Nothing asks to be praised. Nothing asks to be named. The ceremony's promise is not that it will end in a revelation, but that it will continue to unfold at a pace your breath can follow. The tea master's hands return to stillness. The utensils return to their places, seem both used and unchanged, as if purpose had passed through them and left no mark but readiness. You realize that the preparation has not been separate from the drinking. It has been the first half of the taste. The tea bowl rests between your hands now. Its warmth radiates in a steady, even way, neither urgent nor fading too quickly. You feel the subtle irregularities in its glaze, the faint rise where the potter's fingers once shaped the clay, the almost imperceptible depression along the rim that seems designed for the lip. Turning it slowly, you align yourself with the quiet etiquette of the room, rotating the most beautiful side of the bowl away before you drink. This is not to hide it from yourself, but The first sip is small, deliberate. The taste arrives without rush. Green, yes, but a green that is less about leaf and more about the memory of shaded hillsides. It is thick yet smooth, holding on the tongue before slipping back, leaving a faint bitterness that is soon overtaken by a soft sweetness. The warmth travels down your throat and seems to settle somewhere at the center of your chest, as if heat and calm have agreed to meet there. You take another sip, slower still. The foam clings lightly to the rim, leaving a trace like the tide's edge on sand. Breathing through your nose as you drink, you catch the aroma, earthy, faintly grassy, with a suggestion of something that could be wood smoke but is not. The tea master watches without watching, her gaze softened so that it rests somewhere near you but not upon you. This is a shared moment, not a monitored one. Outside, the garden continues its own unhurried ceremony. A breeze moves through the bamboo, setting off a ripple that travels like a low wave across the leaves. The sound is steady, a textured hush that seems to weave into the taste of the tea. The stone basin receives another drop from the bamboo spout. It lands with the smallest hollow tone, and the sound folds into the background like a bead into a string. Between sips, you hold the bowl lightly and let your eyes rest on the tokonoma. The grasses in the vase lean in the same direction they did before, but in the quiet, they appear to have leaned further. The scroll's calligraphy, one time, one meeting, feels now less like advice and more like an observation. You begin to understand that the tea is not the point of the tea, but the tea is also not separate from the point. The final sip arrives without ceremony. You do not plan for it, but the bowl empties itself in your hands. Tilting it slightly, you take in the interior glaze, the swirl at the bottom where water once rested. It is lighter there, almost translucent, and the marks of the potter's wheel spiral outward. You bow slightly to the bowl, an unspoken thanks, before returning it to the tatami in front of you. The tea master receives the bowl with both hands, her fingertips resting along the base as if to feel the lingering heat. She turns it gently, examining the lip and interior. This is not an inspection for flaws, but a silent acknowledgement of what has just passed between bowl, guest, and host. She sets it aside, slightly angled, signaling that it has completed its part in this brief universe. Another bowl is prepared for the next guest, or perhaps for you again, depending on the length of the sitting. This repetition does not lessen the meaning. Instead, it reinforces the rhythm, like the return of a verse in a song. Each preparation feels the same and yet slightly different, shaped by the unique way steam rises today, or by the quiet shift in the master's breathing. You notice the light changing. It enters through the shoji at a lower angle, warmer now, and the edges of the room soften further. The tatami fibers catch the light in a way that reveals their subtle texture, tiny ridges and valleys, woven from rush, smoothed by years. Shadows lengthen gently along the walls. Even the kettle's steam seems to bend toward this slower light. Occasionally, the tea master will speak, a word about the bowl's origin perhaps, or a note on the leaves from which the matcha was ground. Her voice is low, even, each word spaced as though it were placed by hand. The sound fills the room without ever feeling like it disturbs it. When she stops, silence returns naturally, as if it had been sitting nearby all along. Between servings, utensils are cleaned again. The silk cloth folds, unfolds, folds again. The whisk is rinsed and set upright, its bristles opening like a flower in water. The shashaku is wiped in a gesture so familiar it feels older than the room. These acts are not transitions but continuations. The ceremony does not pause, it only changes shape. The drinking of tea, slow and deliberate, creates a space that is difficult to find elsewhere. Here, time does not vanish. It gathers, like dew forming along a leaf's edge. You become aware of the smallest things, the texture of your breath against the back of your throat, the gentle expansion of your chest, the way the heat of the tea lingers in your palms long after the bowl has gone. At last, the tea master sets the final empty bowl aside. There is no announcement that the drinking is over. The air simply begins to shift, as though the room itself knows the arc is nearing completion. The kettle's voice lowers. The bamboo spout outside offers one more note, slightly slower than before. You sit with the feeling that something has ended, though it is hard to say exactly what. The tea master bows again, her head inclining until her gaze meets the tatami. You return the gesture, recognizing that the ceremony's heart is not in the tea alone, but in the shared stillness it has created. This is the fullness that comes not from what has been added, but from what has been allowed to remain. The bowl, the whisk, the scoop, the kettle, they all return to their places. The order of the room reasserts itself, though nothing appears to have been disturbed. The tokonoma remains as it was, the grasses leaning, the calligraphy steady. The scroll still reads, "One time, one meeting," and though the words have not changed, their weight has shifted within you. In the lingering warmth of the tea and the cooling air of the afternoon, you find yourself neither waiting for the next step nor reluctant to leave this one. The tea has been drunk, but the act of drinking feels unfinished in the best possible way. You sense that even as the ceremony continues into its final gestures, a part of it will follow you beyond the sliding door, past the stepping stones, and back into the world. For now, you rest your hands lightly on your knees, breathing in through your nose, out through your mouth, and letting the quiet take its full shape around you. Outside, the day carries on. Distant footsteps on the path, a bird shifting in the plum tree, but here, in this tea room, time holds still just a little longer. The last sip of tea has been taken, and the bowls now rest in quiet readiness on the tatami. There is no rush toward an ending here. The tea room seems to understand that the ceremony's close is not an abrupt event, but rather a gradual returning, like the tide withdrawing from the shore without leaving a mark of where it stopped. The tea master's movements shift subtly, each one still precise, but with a softness that speaks of completion. She begins with the shawan, lifting it gently and turning it so the light catches the glaze one final time. Her gaze is appreciative, yet calm, as if she is conversing silently with the potter who shaped it, the kiln that breathed life into it, and the countless hands that have held it before yours. The chawan is rinsed in warm water drawn from the kettle, the whisk following soon after. You watch as the bamboo bristles bloom again in the water, their pale tips swaying like reeds in a current. The chashaku, too, is wiped clean with the folded silk cloth, the curve of its tip brushed lightly until it gleams faintly in the muted afternoon light. Each act feels like a farewell, measured, gentle, respectful. The kettle's lid is lifted, and the faint scent of steam escapes, carrying with it the last of the ceremony's warmth. The water that remains is not poured hastily, but returned slowly to its rest, as though even the kettle deserves its own moment of quiet after service. The ladle is laid down upon its stand, the sound of bamboo meeting wood as soft as a breath. Beyond the shoji screens, the garden shifts in response to a light breeze. You notice the way the plum tree's blossoms tremble, sending a few pale petals to drift lazily toward the stepping stones. Somewhere further off, a bird calls once. The sound clear but unobtrusive, folding easily into the room's stillness. The tokonoma's simple arrangement, a single scroll, a vase of fresh-cut grasses, remains unchanged. Yet you see it differently now, as if the ceremony has cleared a path for your eyes to rest there without seeking meaning beyond its presence. The calligraphy's strokes seem steadier, the grasses more alive in their quiet curve. The tea master gathers the utensils together, returning each to its rightful place. The natsume is closed and set aside, its lacquered surface reflecting the room's soft light. The silk cloth is folded with deliberate precision and tucked at her side. The shaken, now cooled, is folded and placed near the shawan. Every motion is an ending and a beginning, both at once. When all is in order, the tea master bows deeply, her hands resting on the tatami as her head lowers. It is not a bow to mark the end of hospitality, but one to honor the shared space and time. You return the bow, your movement slower now, as if your body has learned something of the room's rhythm. The tea master rises and slides the shoji open just enough to let in more of the garden's light. The air feels different, fresher, carrying the scent of moss and damp earth. It moves gently across the tatami and brushes against your sleeve before continuing on its way. As you stand, the feeling of the woven mat beneath your feet registers in a new way, firm, textured, and grounding. You take a final glance at the room. The alcove, the kettle, the quiet arrangement of tools. Everything seems to have returned to stillness, but it is a stillness that holds the trace of every movement that has just passed. Stepping into the garden, you follow the same stone path that brought you here. The sound of your steps mingles with the distant drip of water into the stone basin. A single bamboo leaf falls, landing with a whisper against the path before being carried away by the breeze. The tea master walks a short distance behind you, her presence light, almost transparent. She does not hurry you toward the gate. Instead, she allows you to pause by the basin to wash your hands once more in the cool water, to listen to the soft, hollow tone of the bamboo spout as it tips and empties. This, too, is part of the closing. At the gate, you turn and bow again. The tea master's bow is as deep as the first, though now it feels layered with the shared moments between arrival and departure. No words are exchanged, yet everything necessary has been said. As you step beyond the gate, the sounds of the world begin to return. Footsteps on the road, the distant chatter of merchants, the occasional clink of tools from a nearby workshop. But they reach you differently now, softened by the lingering quiet of the tea room. The rhythm of the ceremony remains in you, shaping how you hear and see. Walking away, you find that the world feels both larger and slower. The afternoon sun casts longer shadows, the colors of the street muted yet clear. A faint taste of matcha still rests on your tongue, mingling with the cool air as you breathe. You realize that, although the tea has been drunk, the ceremony is not truly over. It moves with you now, a quiet companion. Perhaps later, as evening falls and the lamps are lit, you will recall the sound of water meeting the tea bowl, the feel of the bamboo whisk in motion, the stillness between each movement. These memories will not arrive as vivid flashes, but as gentle impressions, like the faint scent of tea leaves stored in a jar. And in that way, the closing of the ceremony is not a conclusion, but a folding away, a careful preservation of a moment that will open again when the time is right. For now, you walk on, the garden and tea room behind you, the slow breath of the day ahead, carrying the quiet with you into whatever comes next.